Okay, welcome my Math 210 students. This is going to be a quick tutorial on how to use the program that I put up on our website. It's called row reducing, and it's to help us solve systems of equations. Okay, so I'm going to give us a quick example, easy example, of a system of equations that I have up on the screen, and we're going to do a couple things. First, we're going to put it into our associated matrix, and then input that matrix into the program, and then I'll show you how to go through all the steps to row reduce to the program. Now when you use the program, you should be doing all the row reductions off on the side as well to make sure you are doing the calculations correctly. The goal of the program is to show you the calculations that you should be getting, and if you're not getting them, then it's probably some multiplication error or well, we'll go over that kind of stuff in class. But I just want to show you how the program works. Okay. So on the screen here we have this system of equations: 4x plus 9y is 15, and 2x plus 3y is 6. Okay. Now the first thing we have to do is the associated matrix, which is quite simple because it's just going to be the system here but without the x's and y's and the equal signs. So in the first row we have, well, instead of a 4x plus 9y is 15, we're just going to write the 4, the 9, and the 15. In the second row, instead of 2x plus 3y is 6, we put 2, 3, and 6. This is the matrix we are going to input into the program. Okay. So let's pull out the program. Now when you run it, it might take 20 seconds to load, but that's fine. Just give it some time. Okay, and it should look like this. Okay. Now, the first question it's going to ask is how many rows. Now, if you look at the matrix, we have 2 rows. Okay, there's our first row. Here's our second row. So 2 rows, and we have 3 columns. Then it's going to ask row 1, column 1. It wants to know what number will go in each location. Okay, so if you forgot, this was row 1, column 1, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3. So we're going to put in those numbers, and you can see that it went down to row 2, column 1. So that's starting in this row. So we're going to have 2, 3, and 6. Now the output matrix here should be the same as up here. Okay, if it's not, then we probably entered in the number of rows or columns wrong, or we entered in these numbers incorrectly. Okay. But this here should match what you have here. Now if it doesn't, we have an option down here that says quit. You press -1, enter. It's going to ask, would you like to try again? You say yes, and do it again. Now to row reduce, we have 3 row operations. We have row swap, which is option 1, divide a row, which is option 2, and add row to a multiple of another row, which is option 3. Now that's the hardest row that students have, or that you will have. Okay, but it won't show you the actual work behind it. That's something you have to do on the side. Use this to just check to make sure you did it correctly. Now, the way that we row reduce is we start by trying to make the top left number into a 1, and then we want 1s down the diagonal, where in the column with the 1, everything else needs to be 0. So if this is a 1, then that has to be a 0. If this is a 1 here, 3, then everything in the column, everything else must be a 0. Okay. Just to show you how row swap works. Okay. We're going to swap row 1 and row 2. So we option 1. Okay. In fact, I'll make this bigger now. Okay. Option 1. Which rows do you want to swap? We want to swap row 1 with row 2. And you can see that the 2 rows here have just been switched. Okay. So 4, 9, 15. That was our first row. It's now our second row. Now since I already said that this needs to be a 1, okay, we only have 3 operations. Alright, so you can't subtract 2 from, it doesn't work like that. Alright, we swap the rows. Now we're going to divide the row. Dividing row is what's going to help us make this into a 1. Now what do you have to divide 2 by to make it into a 1? Well, that's 2. Okay, 2 divided by 2 is 1. Alright, but remember, you have to divide everything in this row by 2. Okay, so we're going to do option 2. Which row would we like to divide? That's row 1. And what would we like to divide by? That's 2. Now before we do it, I just want to go through and make sure we're going to get the correct numbers. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. 6 divided by 2 is 3. That's what we get here. So that step worked. Okay, now that's a 1. Now we need to make this into a 0. Okay. Now this is the hardest part, and I'll show you how to do this in class, but this is how you would do it on the program. Okay, so we're going to pick option 3, because option 3 is what's going to have or make that into a 0. First, you're going to need a pivot point. A pivot point is the number in the column that's going to be unchanged. You're going to leave alone. That's the 1 here. Okay, we don't want to mess around with this 1. But this 4 here, we want to make a 0. Okay, so the pivot point is going to be this 1, and we have to write the location of it, which is row 1, column 1. Which row are we adding to the pivot? The row we're adding is the row that we want to change. We want to change this 4. That's in row 2. So row 2. Okay. And there you go. It's now a 0. Okay. If you're doing this on the side and you're doing it correctly, then you should have a 3 and a 3 here. Notice that the first row was left unchanged. Okay. Now since that's a 1 and that's a 0, this column is done because, like I said before, you need to make that a 1 and everything else in that column is 0. Now we move on to the second column. Since 1s have to be down the diagonal, the next number that should be a 1 would be right here. Now right now we have a 3. We need to change it to a 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide the second row by 3. So we're going to do option 2. Which row would we like to divide? That's row 2. And we're going to divide by what? 3. And notice that we now get a 1 here, because 3 divided by 3 is 1. So that worked. Okay, only one more step now. Now this is our 1. We needed to make this into a 0, this 1.5. Okay. Again, the way we do that is by option 3. It's going to ask for the pivot point. Okay, that would be this 1 here, because everything else in the column needs to be a 0, but this stays a 1. So that's location, its location is row 2, column 2. Which row are we adding the pivot? Well, the row we're trying to change is row 1, so row 1. Okay. You can see how now that's a 1, and the 1.5 is now a 0. This is our identity matrix. Okay, when you get this, you're done. There's other things that can happen too, and we talk about that in class. But the goal here is to show you how to go through the steps in the program. Alright, it's up to you to know when you're done. But this is it. Now the first row, depending on how we set up the system, but the first row corresponds to X, the second row corresponds to Y. So our answer is X is 1.5, Y is 1. Let me write that down. Oops. X is 1.5, Y is 1. Now you would check your answers by taking the X and Y and plugging it into the system. But since I haven't been recording how long this video is taking, and YouTube likes to be mad when I go over by a few seconds, I'm going to stop. But check them, make sure that they're correct, which they will be, and if you have any questions, email me. Thank you.